Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way. This is a podcast for serious writers who want to develop their skills in artistry and stand out in a crowded industry by taking intelligent, creative risks. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I hold a PhD in literature. I'm the author of numerous books, and I take a very analytical approach to art making, emphasizing both efficiency and experimentation. Here's the second part of my interview with Keith Cadieux. The show notes for this episode, where you can get more information about Keith and his books. Again, I really recommend his newest work, an anthology he co-edited called The Shadow Over Portage in Maine. I wrote the introduction for that book, and I also have a short story in it under the name Richard Crow. And it has a variety of really excellent work by a lot of different people. David Annandale is in there. A lot of great people. Daria Patry has a nice one. Gaze Riley, John Stintsey, a lot of really interesting contributors. And Keith's story, Stuck, is really excellent. It's something we discuss in these two different interviews. If you haven't already listened to it also, the first part of this interview is available as its own podcast episode. Again, I took a very long interview with Keith where he and I responded to student questions in a university creative writing course that I was teaching. And I split it up into two different episodes. So you will hear us respond to student questions that were previously prepared, written down. I had them on pieces of paper in front of me. Both I and Keith were answering those questions, and I also kind of just talked to him about his work and about various writing publishing topics. So this is the second part. Again, the first part is available as its own episode. Show notes for this episode is at jonathanball.com/3. That's at jonathanball.com/3. And without further ado, here's Keith Cadieux. Sort of a couple questions about approaching publishing houses. Like, how do you find appropriate ones? What have you kind of been found most useful? And then in terms of getting whatever feedback you get from them, like, how do you kind of use it or deal with it?
I guess in terms of finding what the best way, or the I don't even know that it's the most effective, because again, there's just not a whole lot to choose from. But where I've always started is looking into the publishing houses of books that I already really like. So especially if there's anything a little bit more local rather than international that is doing something that I like, I tend to follow very closely what they are putting out from year to year, to see if what I'm working on is going to fit in well with what they're sort of dealing with, or even if it fills a gap. So there's that little bit there of being aware of your market, and that comes down to looking into it, to reading widely in that space. So with horror, for Canadian horror, you have to look at cheesy, which is sort of the dominant Canadian force in that genre. They're definitely they noticed a lack and they filled it, and so they've now risen to this space, so that now they're so busy that I'll never get to talk to them. But and then magazines are the same way. So there's quite a few that have been around for a long time, but those ones are, of course, the most competitive and hard to get into. And then there's ones that are sort of in their mid stage. They've been around 5 or 10 years, so they're stable, but they don't quite have the longevity. And there's few that are new, that are just popping up, and they may do really well, or they may be gone in 6 months. And it's just a matter of paying attention and kind of seeing where authors you like where are their names turning up? Are they editing for any of these places? So something with Canadian publishing is very, very small and very incestuous. So if there's any authors that you know or any that you like, chances are you will find the publishing house that they are an editor for, or the magazine that they run, or the school that they teach at. And then you can stalk them and follow them that way. and sort of see where their stuff is turning up, and just sort of make a judgment call of thinking, well, like, does it fit in there or not?
Can Do you think it's more advantageous nowadays to publish in online or in print? Do you think what do you see as the difference, or when you're looking around? Like, is that a consideration for you?
It's hard to say. I would absolutely publish online. And anything that has appeared online has also appeared in print, so I haven't had like the harsh decision. I would be leery about publishing online for free, depending on the circumstance. But just because once it's published online, then it counts as published, and then you can't ever get it picked up unless it's a reprint thing, which can be tougher to sell. So in terms of like that version of it, like knowing the rules of what counts as a reprint, what counts as original, is important. And then even like it's hard to say, because some print stuff pay you $10, and that's hardly worth it. But you never know, and like there are online markets that do get attention, and even big ones. So bigger publishers like Tor have taken to doing a bunch of stuff that is only available on their site. So that's actually a really good place for novellas, but they don't print them. Like they're on their website. But Tor is one of the big names. That would be harder to get into, and they would pay you. But then there's like Postscripts to Darkness is an online horror mag that's quite good. The Weird Fiction Review, like the resurgence of Weird Fiction Review, started out as online, and then they went, like, it was a print magazine in like the 40s, and it went under, and then it went online again, and that was Jeff and Ann Vandermeer, and then they started printing it again. So it's just as important to just pay attention to making sure that the story is not going to get fall into like a rights limbo where you won't ever be able to put it anywhere else. But in terms of like, is it disadvantageous to publish online? I don't think so.
I think like the question is unanswerable in the sense that it depends on your goals. Like if your goal is to just have, I hate saying the word exposure because it gets used the wrong way, but it is easier to expose a online text. You can send a link to somebody. Is there an advantage to publishing an online journal versus your own website? Sometimes no. So sometimes you might as well just publish on your own website if your goal is to simply have a link you can send to people and like get quote unquote exposure that way. Other times, there are, as you say, online places that people read. Maybe they don't pay a lot or don't pay at all, but they are like ones people do read. And then it's like, who do you want to read it? Like there's online journals that people read in the world, and there's online journals that only editors read, and other writers read them. But maybe that's who you want reading your stuff. I think it depends, like, what is your goal in terms of publishing it.
Yeah, I think so too.
In print, you tend to print tends to still be more prestigious if, say, you're trying to apply for grants. Like, so if you're getting to the point where you want to get if you want to get to the point where you can become eligible for a grant, well, then only certain online journals are going to matter. Only print things will matter more, just because there's a weird prestige bias still. If your goals are, in terms of just getting the most readers, well, again, like some venues online are great for that. Others are terrible for that, If your goal is to just have like a portfolio piece, then you might as well just start your own website and put it there, and then you just have a link. Like, it just kind of depends on your goal, I think. But I think the one big difference is if you're doing, if you're publishing a book that you want people to review, you really have to do it in print with with a traditional publisher. Even though self-publishing has come a long way, and you can make good money self-publishing certain things, that you cannot get reviewed in like anywhere significant still, unless you're also in print and with a traditional publisher. It's nearly impossible to get even a best-selling self-published book reviewed, which, again, if that's your goal. So I think it's just to kind of get into like, what is your goal, to answer questions like that.
Yeah, for sure. Because then there's also like, if your goal is to sell it, then putting it is to make money off of it, then putting it online is that's a very bad idea. But if it's something that is not going to sell, if it's a story about cannibal eating contests, Putting it on your website is like, that's a really viable option to like have it out there, and especially if you have like a weird ugly ducklings like black sheep story that is just very, very strange, or that you can't seem to place, because then you never know if the right person might see it, and they may not be able to buy that particular one, but it may stir up some interest.
In screenwriting, there's a weird phenomenon of people writing spec scripts that are impossible to sell. So like normally what it is with the reason you write a spec script normally, like, which is a script you write on speculation that maybe you would sell it, as opposed to somebody hiring you to write a script. There's a weird phenomenon in screenwriting where people write spec scripts that you literally could not be sold. Like they'll write a sequel to they'll write Terminator 10, or they'll write. I met a guy once who wrote Cool Runnings 2. But the thing is, there's like a very famous, I forget the name of the song, there's a very famous spec script that like is unfilmable because of how offensive the comedy is. But the point of those is to get attention in the industry.
Yeah.
Like it's so far out there or so bombastic that people are just reading it as like a sample of what you can do, and like there's no rules, and there's no like possibility it will be sold or made.
Yeah.
So they feel really free to just do wild and crazy things. And the idea is as opposed to normal spec script, the idea is just to get attention. Like, who doesn't want to read Terminators meets dinosaurs? Even if you could never sell that movie and no one would ever make it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like maybe you'll get like your name out there or something. Like, so sometimes I think like, I know like that's a phenomenon, or I don't know if it's still around, but it used to be a thing in film for a little while. It was like a phenomenon of people writing spec scripts that like they just knew they couldn't sell, but it was going to get them a job maybe, or get them attention, and kind of make a name for like the bombastic nature of the idea. Although this guy did sell Cool Runnings too. I can't remember if they made it or not, but I know he sold Cool Runnings too. It was like his weird claim to fame. He was an interesting cat.
Well, then, like in self-publishing, now I can't remember his name.
Well, there's a question about self-publishing. Maybe just.
And it's going to ruin the story, but like similar to that, there's the guy who self-publishes on Amazon who has all the really weird gay
John
erotica.
Oh no, sorry, that's a different guy.
Yeah, and it's like pounded in the butt by my own Nebula Award kind of stuff. Like it's so ridiculous, and like he churns out like 10 of these books a day. They're all like 1,200 words.
Do you know much about self-publishing?
Ludicrous.
There's a question about whether some of the pros and cons of self-publishing.
I haven't self-published anything myself. The cons are definitely like it's harder to get the quote unquote legitimate attention. So it's hard to get reviewed. Anything you self-published, then traditional publishers will not go near it unless you're Andy Weir or E.L. James.
Yeah, weird examples.
And sell like tens of millions, and all of a sudden they want a piece of it, and then they'll buy it. But you're right that there are lots of people who make decent money at it and can make it viable, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of not writing work to get to that point. Like there's a lot of understanding markets and even software programming to know how to make your own ebooks properly. And
the thing people don't realize about self-publishing is that it is. People often think, "Oh, I'm circumventing publishers." Like, I don't need to have somebody pick me. I don't need to be picked up by a gatekeeper. Like the idea being that I'm not going to wait. I know that I've got something here. Even I'm not going to I don't need somebody else to recognize and so on. Often, there's other reasons people do it, but often I see people are interested in self-publishing because of the idea that they don't have to deal with a publisher. But they don't realize, though, is they have to become a publisher.
Yeah.
What self-publishing means is you are a publishing company. You're no longer really a writer in many respects.
You're competing with the publishers.
You're now competing with other publishers, and you are... you're paying for everything. I think I've seen it, and I know people who have done it very successfully. And there are some great examples and great reasons to do it. But the thing you have to really think about if you're going to self-publish is, one, you have to kind of figure out, why do you want to do it? What's your goal? if your goal is because you can make more money self-publishing, with the same amount of sales. Like say you sell, the same amount of books publishing with a traditional publisher or self-publishing. Self-publishing you can make shockingly high amount of money versus a very tiny amount of money, maybe. You're kind of getting instead of 10% maybe of royalty, you could be getting upwards of 50, 70%. But you're also doing all this outlay of money, which with a traditional publisher. One of the other questions is related to how you recognize legitimate publisher. One of the ways you recognize a non-legitimate publisher is that you have to pay the money.
Yeah.
You should never, be putting out money, typically.
Not to a publisher. If you want to hire your own editor or something like that, it's different. But if anyone, in order to publish, needs upfront money, that's a scam.
When you're self-publishing, the big con of it, the pro of it is basically control. You have now total control of a project, which I think is often a con, frankly.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you shouldn't be in control of things. You think you should pick the cover, but you shouldn't. You think you should be in charge of this, but you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But you do have the option of creative control. That's a big pro. You usually have creative control for the most part with a traditional publisher anyway. But the big con of self-publishing is you are now a publishing company, and you are in a marketplace competing with other publishing companies, and you are small potatoes, and you're new, and the costs can be very low. If you're not doing print books, for example, and you're only doing ebooks, well, your upfront costs might be relatively small. But if you want to but now you got to have a marketing machine, you have all these associated costs that you're not thinking about, or you just have the difficulty of, you are a publicist now, you're a publisher now, you're also a business manager now. You got to file taxes, you need a business license, you need to do all these things, you got to send copies to Libraries and Archives Canada, you got to get an ISBN number. You just basically are in business of publishing, and so if you don't want to be, that's an issue. Personally, I think I have done some self-publishing projects, and I'm looking to do more. But I think the future, personally, is kind of a hybrid model where you are both publishing with traditional publishers and doing certain self-publishing projects, and you have a kind of a quote-unquote business model that incorporates a variety of things. But it's, I think it's very much a business decision and not something to just do, if that makes sense.
No, it's something you need to know what you're getting into. And I don't know a lot of people who have self-published successfully. I know a fair few who have self-published unsuccessfully, and usually their desire to do it was they didn't want to deal with a traditional publisher was because they had been rejected by a traditional publisher, and they didn't want to take the advice of being told that what you have is not perfect and it needs work. And so they just decide, well, no, it's golden, and I will just put it out in the world and I will reap the rewards. So I know someone who had a book that was picked up but needed to be edited, and she pulled it and self-published it herself rather than edit it to a traditional publisher's specifications. And it's just the ego on you. They are a company that you're not the only person they've published. They've got this figured out. The fact that you wouldn't
They don't really.
Some of them do.
Yeah, they do and they don't, right?
For sure, but there is a little bit there of learning how to do it and accepting some humility that you don't know how to do everything. So if you get to the point where you really do know what you're doing and you want to take it on as a serious project, absolutely have at it. And there are lots of the hybrid you're talking about can work and is working for a few. So a big horror name that does that is Adam Neville from the UK. That he's published a bunch of fairly big novels, and then the Netflix movie The Ritual is one of his. So he makes tremendous novel deals. But he has 3 books of short stories that no one wanted, so he self-published them. And he did really, really well. but he had this great fan base that he could all, like, he already had all these people who bought his books already. So then when he put it out there, like, they lapped it up. And yeah, like, you're right, like his cut of those royalties was way higher than dealing with a traditional publisher. But he had this foundation already built because he had worked for years selling novels through traditional publishing.
Yeah, you don't necessarily make a lot of money selling books through a traditional publisher. Like, but basically, like, if you think you're going to make money selling books, you got a real eye-opening experience ahead of you. You know, like, where you make money. I like to joke that the like, with when I publish a poetry book, I make more money in reading from the book for 15 minutes, like, than I do like publishing the book typically. Or like, I'll get more. I've made more money. The most money I've made for a creative project is a novel, The Crow Murders, that have not published. I have made over $100,000 in grants, scholarships, various things related to people who want me to publish and finish this book. Yeah. And
it's time, John. You got to finish this damn book.
Well, I'm going to start like publishing it very very soon. but it's ridiculous, like the ratio of like what a book would sell make you versus like how much money you get paid to go talk to somebody because you wrote a book. You know, like, so I think there's a sort of level of, there's a way that you can see a book as like a business card in a sense, and like a marketing piece, as well as like being an artistic object. And I think it's just more interesting to me to like think of a book as like an experience I want a reader to have. Mm-hmm. And a thing I want them to engage with. And so I give away a lot of books. Like a lot of my books, I will buy hundreds of books from the publisher. Like I just bought 300 copies of The Politics of Knives not too long ago, which my third book, from the publisher. And I just, I give them out. I sell them to people for like $3, mm-hmm. And whatever else. I pay like $2 each for these copies. And then, once in a while I'll sell one for like a full price, but for the most part I just kind of want people to engage with them, and it's not so much to me about selling books, mm-hmm. Because I think when you get in the headspace of I gotta sell books, I think it's a dangerous headspace to be in, because now you're marketing to everybody you meet and so on and so forth, mm-hmm. But then at the same time you do want people to read these books, and you don't want your publishers losing money on the books and stuff. So I think there's a nice like middle space where if you see like your money coming from things around the books, and you use the books as like a way into like what else you're doing, I think it helps you not be a marketer so much as like a person who's like trying to like legitimately get people connected to your book. But it also like helps you and it helps you to not stress about things like how much money would I make on this book, or what's my advance going to be, or whatever else.
Yeah.
And you can just worry instead about writing cool, weird books. Like my thing personally was always, I'm going to try to do the strangest thing, like that interests me. I'm not going to try to water anything down ever. So the downside of that is, you're very niche in a certain sense. Your marketability is maybe, difficult for people. The strength of it is, the people who really want what you're doing will kind of have a deeper connection to it. And so I think like at that point, at least for the stuff I've been doing, I feel like there's a level at which it's more important to just connect to a person than sell a book. And the book's like this conduit for an experience, if that makes sense. And so like, to me, everything sort of should go around that sort of, I don't know, it's kind of an abstract way of talking about it, but I think like any decision you make about like how you try to promote your work, or how you, where you publish, or what you do, it should kind of revolve around, whether you're self-publishing or not, I think it should kind of revolve around what are you trying to create as an experience for like a person who's engaging with your work, rather than like, am I going to get 10% or 15% of the sales or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Like it's well with anything artistic, like you have to examine your motivations and like, are you doing it to connect to another person or to provide this experience or to make money? Because if you just want to make money, there are way more lucrative ways.
I think it's fine to want to make money. I just think
it would be a great bonus to write this great book that you're proud of and to make money off of it like that.
It would be, but what's a realistic? Because here's another question related to that. Like, where do you actually get your money from? Like, maybe you don't want to answer that question, but how do you make your living? Is it just writing, or do you have other sources of income? Like,
no, I've got the day job happening, so I get to work in the arts, which is good. And so there's a lot of people end up teaching, which was my goal for a while, and I've ended up in another job that takes up too much time, so I stopped teaching. But I work in the office for the Winnipeg International Writers Festival. So I'm still connected to the literary community. I get a lot of free books, which is great. But yeah, there's definitely a supplementary income because, so having this book out means that I can apply for other grants. It means I might be asked to speak somewhere and get paid to do that. It might mean getting to write articles for something else. I very briefly was a scriptwriter for a true crime show that was canceled. So like it can parlay into these other interesting opportunities. But like if your goal is to be like a writer as you're living, you are going to make that up from a lot of different projects. Like it's very rarely that you're going to be able to just do one type of thing and make money off of it, but you can certainly cobble together enough work to make a living by being a writer. But then you have to treat it like a job. You're going to end up writing a bunch of stuff that you don't really want to write, but you do it for money. So you write, I don't know, shitty opinion pieces or online.
Your shitty opinions.
that's my column's name. My shitty opinions. With Keith Cato.
Cadieux.
But it's more that it's the discipline of it, and so I have a day job so that I can eat food and have a place to write, because the writing is not doing it
I think
money wise, but I get a lot of fulfillment out of having written that book and having sold it and getting to talk to people about it like that. That feels really good. Like that's better than working at Walmart.
I feel like weirdly people think too much about money and not enough about money. Like I think when people are like for an individual say you write a book, I think people worry too much about how much money can I make on this book? Where's the publisher? Like can I get a big deal? Can I do this? Can I do that? Maybe I should try an agent. Maybe I should try a non-agent. Like maybe I should self-publish. Maybe I shouldn't. I think like people on one hand kind of worry too much about money, like for like a specific project. On the other hand, I think they don't worry enough about money in terms of like, again, like the book as a thing that could actually make you some money. But I think usually it's making you money in indirect ways. I think people need to think more about like the indirect ways they make money around their writing, and more about and less about like exploiting their money if they're writing for money. And I find whenever I talk to somebody who has managed to make like a good amount of money writing, is typically because they are just engaged in a process of writing, and they're doing a lot of stuff, and some of it makes some money, some of it doesn't. But then around that, they've got all these things that like, because they've published this book, they can do this thing or that thing. They go do a speaking gig. They go do teach a course, or whatever. And like personally, like I have years where last year I made a little over half my money writing. The year before that I made, almost no money writing. The year before that, I made, a third of my money writing. I've had years where I made most of my money writing, but it's very much that kind of, the problem with writing is cash flow. Mm-hmm. Like the problem is like I've had months where I made $30,000 in that month, and then I had then I don't make any money for 7 months. So it's like you kind of have to be very careful about your cash flow. You
need this business sense, and even for a book that has if you were to get a big deal, let's say you got $100,000 book deal. Well, what if it took you 6 years to write that damn book?
Yeah, and maybe
you weren't getting anything. You might not ever get anything after that.
I used to be in music, and well, you were just talking about music before this class began. I remember once talking to a woman who she was kind of in charge of giving the band, like she was the point person who like would deliver the money to the band, and like would kind of interact with them around a lot of various businessy kind of things. Like, and she was like, this this weird experience where like you tell somebody, here's like $5 million, and they're like, I'm rich. They're like, no, you're not rich. You have to make that last for 10 years, you know. Plus you got to pay all these people, you know. You know, it's like you're not rich. Like, don't go buy a new house. Like, don't go. You maybe got $5 million, but it's, you know, it's not as much money as it seems like it is, you know.
Sure.
And like I've seen, one of the things people don't realize about like big advances, which are very rare now, but like these big advances can kill your career. You could, you know, be destroyed entirely and never publish again if you take too big an advance.
Yeah, well, like you're right to point that out, because part of the reason that the advances are getting smaller is if the publisher loses money on your advance, that's basically what makes you blacklisted. Like if you don't sell enough copies to buy out your advance, like that's where the advance comes. It's an advance on your royalties. So it's not, here's money for your book, here's an amount of money we're anticipating we're going to make off the book, and here's your cut. And if you don't get that high, they're not signing you for another one.
And maybe no one else will ever. Because everyone knows you got this big advance.
Everybody knows that. Yeah. And so you had mentioned, I can't remember.
You can come back from
house.
it, but it's rare.
I can't remember the publishing house that did it, but they paid Jay Leno this giant advance,
and
no one wanted his book, so they just ate that cost, right? And then
my
all
friend
the
had
other
her contract canceled for a book of hers that was going to come out, and then they just tried to get the advance back from her, which of course she didn't give them. You know, you don't have to return the advance under any conditions,
for sure,
unless you screw up and don't do something. But like in that case, you know,
so big advances are misleading. Like they're very rarely a super good sign. Like you may luck out and get one and everything will be fine, but you'd more you want your film option more than you want your big advance.
Your film that never gets made,
or residuals or something. Like those are other things that end up getting you paid money for your work. And
maybe I'll do one more publishing question, then take a little break. How did you break into publishing? Is there a point when publishers begin to recognize you and want to publish you? What do you think about that question? You probably get that question a fair amount. I get the question a lot. How did you break into publishing?
Yeah.
And like, is there a point publishers recognize you? I don't think you can break into publishing. Like that's, you know, I'll let you maybe ask the question, but.
Well, my story is sort of a cop-out, because mine wasn't particularly hard. I really lucked out. So I did, Gaze was my creative master's thesis that I wrote this novella as part of my degree. And I sent it out, and it was picked up by a publisher before I graduated, which almost really screwed me over, because you cannot graduate with a published work. So I had to get them to hold it a couple of weeks so that I could graduate. So, but that was the first thing I ever sent out.
He means like your master's thesis can't be published prior to
graduating.
Being your master's thesis.
Yeah. So, so I had written it. I had my defense all set up, sent it away. They took it, and they're like, "Well, here's our publishing date." And I was like, "Well, your graduation, you can't. No, tell them to stop." So they had to hold it. I've been rejected since, but that was the first thing I sent out, and that is so fluky. that it would be picked up and actually and because it was a novella, which is again something that is sort of hard to find, but there's a small publishing house in Toronto called Quattro Books, and that's all they publish is novellas.
Are they still around?
Yeah,
really?
They're still around. They've won a few awards, not for mine, but so yeah, that was like the weird.
Do you think people break into publishing though? Like I get asked that a lot, and people have this idea that there's a certain point where you break into publishing. I don't believe that's true.
I don't think so either, because I've heard enough stories about people who broke and then disappeared, and then had to claw their way back. So you have like Craig Davidson, who had this short story collection come out that did really, really well, sold the film rights to a French company, made a huge deal, and then had a novel, and that was nominated for the Giller Prize, and he had all these accolades, and everyone's like, he's broken into publishing, he's a big deal. Second book came out, no one cared. Oh, like the worst failure. And then like he was dropped from his publisher. He lost his agent. Like all these things that he had.
Horror under a pseudonym.
Yeah, like everything he had built up was yanked out from under him, and he just basically like perseverance. He's just a tough-headed guy who he just kept working anyway. And now he's come. Craig Davidson, the name has come back. Like he's doing very, very well. And then he also publishes as Nick Cutter. And he had another pseudonym before that. Yeah. So he's more like he's an embodiment of the grind. Like he didn't break into anything. He worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And now you sort of have to deal with them.
I think you kind of have to break into publishing every time you do something again. So it's kind of like every time there's a wall, you have to push through. And yes, there are publishers, if you work with them, maybe they want to work with you again for various reasons, but sometimes they don't. Like the story I like to tell about, is there a point people getting recognized and want to publish you? Yes, sort of. Like you get fans basically, and like some of the fans will become publishers or editors. So they'll like request like, hey, can you send something to my journal? I'm editing it now. I really like your stuff. And you'll send it to them, and then often they'll publish it. But even then you'll get a rejection sometimes.
Yeah.
My favorite story about this is when you start to meet people. Also think, oh, you make all these friends, you get these connections. As you were saying, like there's a very incestuous sort of literary community in Canada, especially. But it doesn't necessarily help as much as you think. Like my favorite story is my first book. Book Thug published my first book, but before that, I had sent it to some other publishers who had rejected it. It got rejected for 3 years, and then I sent it to Coach House Books, and Alana Wilcox, who was, I knew her already, and actually we were back in the days of like Facebook Words with Friends. We were like playing this version of Scrabble over Facebook together. And then I'm like, I'll send my book to Alana. Like she had I just kind of gotten to know her a bit more, and like we met her a few times. We had gotten kind of friendly online and whatever. So anyway, I send my book to her, and and we're playing Words with Friends like regularly at this point, right? And so and she rejected the book. And so there's literally a moment in in her life where like I make my move on Words with Friends, and then she like makes her move. Then she writes me a rejection letter. And meanwhile, I'm making my move. And then she like, mails off the rejection letter or whatever, and then makes her move, and then that publisher, but then she did publish my second book, and then later on, and then I published I published another book with them. They published the Fallout book, my third book. But then I sent them, and I've got another book coming out next year with Coach House Books. But then I sent them another book, and they're like, I like it a lot, but we can't publish this book for various real reasons. It's like a short story book, and they're like, they can only publish so many short story books. They don't sell it well enough. They'd already got their short story lineup and something, so they kind of like so she rejected it again. So at that point, I'm getting rejected by somebody who I'm friends with, get along really well with. They published 2 of my other books. So I sent the book to somebody else. Book Thug ended up, who had published my first book, is going to be my second book with them. And then I sent so then on the heels of her rejecting my book, I sent her another book that they accepted. So you're kind of always, even when you have a really good relationship with publishers like that, like both his publishers I have, great relationships with and everything. And I've got books coming out with them now, but even that, then you're getting like rejected, just because that's what happens. Like sometimes it has nothing to do with you, and sometimes it has nothing to do with them. It's just what's going on. And other times, it's just they don't have the enthusiasm necessarily that they want to have or whatever. And so you're always kind of starting over in many ways, even if there's a little bit of a head start, you're still kind of running a new race every time,
Yeah, every project is its own thing, and then there's people too, like the breakthrough idea that they've gotten one of the big 5. They get one book through them, and then they never want to publish with a big publisher ever again. They didn't like it, so they go back and start going through the micro presses again. That's something that's happening a lot now because like Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster, their mandate for the amount that they want to sell in order to make money is ludicrous. So like if they're only going to take you if you're going to sell 300,000 copies, you're not selling 300,000 copies in Canada with your first book. Like you're just not. But Stephen King will. So they'll put all their money into optioning the Stephen King book, and like they put all their money in cookbooks and Norwegian thrillers. That's what's making money right now. So then you have people who have had really big releases who essentially do start over and they go through the smaller presses again.
Even Stephen King, a little while ago I was reading a short story book by Stephen King, and he has those little notes in the back of he has a little like paragraph about the story and where it came from and all this stuff. I remember reading one of those, and it was like a few years ago only. So he's massive still. He's maybe bigger than he's ever been almost, other than like when the 80s. But and they'll notice like this story was rejected by whatever, and so I sent it here. It's like, what? You're Stephen King, like at the height of your powers, one of the biggest authors on earth, and they're still rejecting him every now and again.
Yeah.
So. At that point, you could just self-publish it. He's done his self-publishing experiments also, but like
he would benefit from a few people telling him no. Also, though,
I mean, I don't know. It depends.
Every now and then,
but he's also one of those guys who, like, I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting. It is a weird. I think it's a weird sort of myth that there's like a point where you break in and like things are easier. I think things just get harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
In many ways.
How uplifting.
One of the first classes you talked about your process, how you get into the zone when you're going to write. So I'm curious if you have any weird sort of routines that you.
It sort of depends on the it's sort of changed project to project. I'm sort of in a bit of a funk at the moment because I am in the middle of moving, and it's too stressful. So I haven't been writing very much lately, but when I wrote the novella, it was very much like late at night. I wouldn't even start till like 10 o'clock at night, and I would write in the dark and stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And then when I ended up with my partner, she didn't like that I never went to sleep. So that changed.
Goes, yeah.
And then I guess like one thing in terms of like zone or repeatable processes, I tend to start out longhand. Like I'll actually write by hand in a notebook, type it up, write it out longhand again, type it up again, and like that's sort of my drafting process. I know a lot of people will do it on just straight on the computer and edit and go back, and I find it more effective to dump it all out in its entirety and then go back and mark it up, and then as I retype it up again, it changes quite a bit. But in terms of like, I don't have the same kind of Agalok or how do you pronounce that band's name?
I don't know how to say the name. I think it's Agalok.
I don't quite have the Pavlov's dog response for my creativity. I'm interested to try it, but I'm leery of the years of listening to that same album that you put in to train your brain.
Talk about that?
Yeah, you played us the beginning.
Oh yeah, it's the same beginning, same songs in the same order all the time. I can't listen to them for fun anymore, and they're a good band. That's the tragedy of it all.
Yeah. So like there's, I've tried a lot of different approaches, but I haven't settled on just one, I guess. I did the track. I had a spreadsheet for a while to like keep track of how much I was doing, and then I sort of wimped out on doing that. Yeah, I don't know.
It's hard to do the same thing consistently.
Like that. I find I get tired of it, and then I have to mix it up. And that, because if I keep doing the same thing for too long, then I actually sort of start to dread doing it, and then I just sort of put it off for too long.
What do you do? And do you ever feel blocked? That's a big question people often have. Is do you feel blocked, or do you believe in writer's block, etc.?
Yeah, like I said, so there are definitely peaks and valleys. The best way to sort of get through that for me is I know you've done this and sworn off doing this, but I have more than one project on the go at the time. I usually have more than one story. I have short works and a longer work. So if I get really stuck on one, then I will jump ship and start just to get progress on something. I'll work on something else until I sort of work back around. And that kind of rotation has served me pretty well to actually keep going. It means every piece is taking for friggin' ever to finish because I only do little bits of it and then I jump onto something else. So it's not very good for actual productivity, but maybe in a year or so I'll have so many things done all at once. Who knows? It could work out in my favor.
I mean, I've been doing it lately and it's a mistake. But it does work better than doing nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so where I find, I've just had to do recently because I've been taking on all this additional freelance work, or even if it's, whether it's creative or not creative, like, nonfiction or whatever, or editing work. But because I've been doing like so much, even technically this teaching is technically freelance work because I don't have a job. Like, I'm a writer who does additional teaching now and again. But it's very disruptive to me to do multiple things. But it's better than not doing anything.
Yeah, it is. Or sometimes too, like I'll go back to stuff that like consuming media that I really like, or that has really pushed me that like I want to do something like that. I'll reread stuff that I really like, or I'll rewatch a series that really gets me feeling more creative and wanting to sort of rise to that level. So like I'll watch Hannibal, which is like one of my favorite shows. I just think it's so well done, and I find it so intricate. So I'll watch it very, very carefully and trying to pick apart just how it's put together, and that gets me thinking about my own stuff and taking it apart that carefully. And sometimes that can be a good like a jump start, is to really get into consuming an artistic product that you really like.
How do you? This is the last maybe question that is written down, which is, how do you create an idea that hasn't been thought about already? Or if you're, another question that kind of related to this is like, how do you know if you're drawing influence from other things? How do you know whether you're just ripping them off? like
Yeah.
Where's the line there? Between like taking influence and kind of ripping somebody off, and like doing something that's kind of like the things you love versus something that's kind of more interesting or original to you.
Yeah. That's tougher. Like, in terms of, are you ever going to have an absolutely 100% original idea? No one's ever had that idea before? No.
You can't, or you
You're
wouldn't
not.
recognize it as literature or whatever, right?
So it's all a matter of putting a twist on it and making it different enough that it comes out as original. And sort of like when there was certainly a period of time where I was definitely a sponge for writing manuals and writing advice, and like just trying to take in as much as possible, and parsing out, like, over time I've parsed out what was good and what's not and what does apply. But I've definitely come across a subset of writers or people who think about writing who cut themselves off from other ideas in order to not be contaminated by them, and I think that's bullshit. That is the worst idea, and that just fuels your own. Like, I think you're more likely to rip stuff off if you create that vacuum, because you're not actually engaging with what's out there, and so you're not subverting what already exists. Like, you're not even trying to get around ideas that already exist, because you're not even acknowledging them.
It sounds paradoxical, but like cutting yourself off from quote unquote influences by like you're not paying a lot of attention to the genre you're working in or whatever. Like, it's paradoxically a good way to rip people, like to be unoriginal, because you think you're being super original, but you don't know that everybody's dead. That thing's dead and over. Yeah. Like, people were doing that 5 years ago. You think you just invented it. Yeah. What you don't realize is like things are just in the air. And
I think you're much more likely to unconsciously rip off something like that in that instance, rather than soaking in as much as you can. Getting outside, like, if it's something in terms of like you want a really original idea genre-wise, or you want to do something different, going outside your genre while you're working can be a really good way to find ideas that work in other genres or in other story types, and trying to apply them to what you're doing. Like, that would be a good way to actually expand it and look for tropes or elements that are different and incorporate them that way.
Well, and people we recognize as originals, like people who we look at their work and say, these people are unlike everyone else. They're really unique. They're really creative. If you really look closely, those people are just combining things. Like, it's like a guy like Ligotti he's working in the mold of somebody like Lovecraft, but he's avoiding specific aspects of what Lovecraft's doing. He's bringing in parts of what Kafka's doing. Somebody who has nothing to do really with weird fiction, but is kind of related to the fantastic in various ways. He's pulling in like stylistic elements from other people, like I forget the name of this guy, but there's an old strange writer from like well before Lovecraft that is very similar stylistically to Ligotti in some ways. Joshua talks about him in the Modern Weird Tale. But he's like somebody that nobody really remembers anymore. So often, like the real quote unquote originals, if you actually look really close, like they're just doing something better than everybody else, and they're kind of combining like disparate elements from multiple areas, or they're subverting something that is already there, like McCarthy you were talking about earlier. And they're not. I can think of very few examples where somebody is like inventing a thing. And if it seems like they're like David Markson's a person who kind of invented a genre of the novel. Markson writes these weird these weird novels that are just like trivia fragments about other artists. And like in between, like every 5th or 6th page, there'll be like a tiny little 2 lines of like narrative, and then it's just a bunch of trivia fragments. So like Picasso, painted a crow once, and like, and they're just weird novels that like don't have anything really that a normal novel has. It's more like a nonfiction genre in many ways, but they have like these minimal elements. It's almost like the minimal elements of what constitutes a novel, and then like all this other stuff from like nonfiction genres thrown in there. But and like the syntax is weird. So he's the only like modern writer I can think of offhand who has kind of created his own genre that nobody else is really writing in, and he's not writing it anymore, of course, now either, because he died. But at the same time, you can point to all the places that like he got this idea from this person, he connected this person and this person and that thing, and he arrived at this. It's always that sort of thing where it's like this person is kind of really if you look closely and you knew the history, like they're combining things rather than, and that's what creation is in so many ways. Maybe one last question or some last thoughts. One last question for Keith. How about your last thoughts? How do you want to be remembered, Keith? As a writer,
As a writer,
let's just go back to the original question of like the horror. Like, why horror? Like, what is the appeal to you of horror?
I really like to be unsettled. Like that's what draws me to horror. So like a lot of stuff that I really like. So like with Ligotti, like what I really like is just it sort of leaves you a little bit shook up. And like there's horror that I enjoy that is like more the jump scare, the monsters, and those are more fun, but you're not quite rattled. And so that's just where my mind tends to go, I guess. I joke that I have a nefarious brain. I'm just very mistrusting of everybody and always look like I don't believe in the best in people most of the time. So I like sort of delving into the dark place, like in terms of like the long thought, like really thinking through and it's not like, for me, it's not a nihilistic thing. It doesn't make me not want to live anymore. I just sort of go down that way. I find it interesting to explore that avenue of it. And so something like The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which is this work of philosophy that it's basically the idea is we're always told that life is inherently good, that to be alive is better than to be dead. And the whole...
It's the Gotti book, by the way.
Yeah, and the whole reason behind this book is like, well, what if it's not? Like, why do we assume that? And it's like, well, that's interesting. And it's
why
very
shouldn't
dark.
The human race extinguish itself?
Yeah.
Like, that's the actual... Ligotti's traces like the philosophical history of pessimism, the idea that the human race should extinguish itself.
Yeah, because if life is not inherently good and it's suffering, then the most humane thing to do would be to stamp it out entirely, make it stop. I find that a very interesting thought experiment. It's not actually what I hope will become of the world. I enjoy I like seeing the gray areas of the world, and like the dark stuff tends to explore that a little bit more thoroughly. And in terms of like writing it out, is a really great way to explore those ideas. But in terms of sharing those ideas, it may be the little sadistic part of me, but I love being told that I creeped someone out. I think that makes me feel great.
Great. Well, Creepy Keith, thanks for visiting. Thanks very much. Round of applause.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Creepy Keith.
That was my second part of the interview with Keith. Again, if you haven't heard the first part, you can go find that at writingthewrongway.com. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for listening. Please do me a favor, subscribe to this podcast, give it a rating, give it a review. Those things really help make this podcast discoverable to other people. It helps us move up in the rankings, or even just helps the search find things. When you type in writing, no one's going to be typing in the wrong way. But writing gets a little more competition. Thank you again for listening. Keep writing the wrong way, and we'll talk to you next week.
We got